on my end, I've been around long enough to see whether it's an orthopedic issue, back pain, some sort of neurological issue going on, that medication seems to be something very quickly people move to. And arguably, right, like we can sit here and say, oh, is that a problem with the medical doctors? I don't know. Maybe it's a problem on both, the patient and the doctor. I'm not so sure. I personally think there is a time and a place for medication. I'm not totally against it, but do you mind just speaking a little bit about your methodology, your philosophy on how you work with people that usually doesn't include medication?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to share the types of cases that we've been able to work with. So concussion, traumatic brain injury, stroke, Parkinson's, balance disorders, kids with ADHD, attention, focus, vertigo, dizziness, balance issues. So those are pretty much the cases that we've been able to see some really, really good results. And really it comes down to a philosophy of trying to utilize sensory exercises. So what is sensory exercise? It's eye movements, it's head vestibular head movements, using the limbs. They call that using moving either the arms or legs, doing sound breathing program, a sensory program, obviously using rhythm and timing or coordination. Those are kind of such the exercises that we use. And then the key is to, based on the history of what their function or what they're having problems with, and then looking at functional tests. So I look at some vestibular tests, we look at eye movement tests, we look at balance, we look at coordination and watching them walk. And why do we do that is because all those tests are functional tests that represents how different areas of the brain and nervous system are functioning. So once we find out like where an area that it's an issue, the next thing you want to look at is, how does that area respond if you give it exercise?
Hmm.
And then the other thing, and here's the two-part question is, well, what happens if you give it an exercise and they don't respond? Well, how do you know if they're going to respond good or bad? Well, you could repeat the test. Did the test get better? Um, or sometimes if they have some kind of symptoms, are their symptoms either worse after they do the exercise? So once you kind of you listen to their history that tells you what their areas of issue are, which tell you what part of the brain is an issue, and then you do those functional tests. You have a window of, okay, here's where the issue is, and then the second thing is, well, how does that issue respond to exercise? And if it doesn't respond, then what's the next thing you do is, this is kind of where the artistry of where that we've been able to come in is, we can kind of go into another area because we know that like the musculoskeletal system, like if you have a back problem, you might have a foot and ankle problem, right?
Hmm.
And we know everything is connected. So it's the same thing in the nervous system. We can go to another area and we can give it exercise that area will eventually come back around to activate the area that you have an issue, but where it will not, where it will be able to handle the exercise appropriately. And how would you know? You again, you go in, you see if the symptoms got better. How would
Right.
you know? You repeat the evaluation test. You see if those tests get better
Right.
because they're functional tests. And a lot of times you'll give them, here's the problem, you give them exercise over here. Or the other thing that makes up this whole formula is, how many repetitions do you give them?
Right.
If you're using the software and you have colors, what kind of color you give them? How fast do the targets go? These are all little things that make huge differences. And obviously, so how can you build a program? I have a lot of experience. So
Right.
we've had probably over 500 people use the software very successfully. So I have patterns in my head And that's what we're working on now in the software, is developing more protocols and patterns to help the practitioners. But yeah, I mean, that's really the philosophy, is history, functional test, understand where the issue is, and then how does that area respond to exercise? If it does, you give them that that exercise. If you don't, you now think about what other areas can connect to that area. Can you give exercise in another area that they overall might respond really well? And if you do that, we usually have pretty good success.